If you've ever walked off the course thinking, I hit it pretty well, but I just didn't score very well, the book I'm about to review explains why that feeling keeps happening. Hey, this is 3-Putt Paulie, aka the Golf Tech Nerd, where we use real data to make golf improvement a little less mysterious and a lot more measurable. Today I'm reviewing Every Shot Counts by Brodie. I gotta say, this book is probably the most important book to my fledgling new golf game. I'm a data guy. This book's got lots of data. I've probably read the book twice. I've gone back to it many other times. So I'm not here to give the book away. I just want to walk through how it's built chapter by chapter and explain why the structure of the book actually gets to the point. So the book is broken into two parts. Part one is about golf performance. Chapter 1, putting is overrated. I've got some quotes I want to share in this video today. We also used to believe that the universe revolved around a stationary Earth. Just because an idea has been repeated and accepted through the years doesn't make it true. This book opens by challenging one of golf's most deeply ingrained beliefs, that putting is the most important part of scoring. Putting is important. This book is not anti-putting. But Brodie's point is that putting has been overweighted in how golfers explain their scores. Because putting happens last, it's easy to blame, but that often hides the shots that created the situation in the first place. This chapter introduces the confirmation bias concept, where we remember the missed putts, and we forget the approach shots that never gave us a realistic chance in the first place. Chapter 2, numbers talk. Between the best pros and average pros, between pros and amateurs, and between good amateurs and poor amateurs, the number shows that putting contributes about 15% to the difference in scores. Tee to green shots explain the remaining 85% of score differences. So Chapter 2 proves the point from Chapter 1 using real data. Across every skill gap, pros to amateurs, good amateurs to poor amateurs, putting accounts for only about 15% of scoring differences. Everything else explains the other 85%. The takeaway isn't putting doesn't matter. It's that putting usually can't compensate for poor tee to green play. Chapter 3 talks about stroked gains putting. Brodie invented the concept of strokes gained that the PGA has adopted. Why? Counting putts is a deeply flawed way of measuring a golfer's skill because it doesn't take into account distance, the most important factor in the difficulty of the putt. Distance matters. A 2-putt from 60 feet is a good result. A 2-putt from 2 feet is a poor result. A simple count of putts gives 2 in both cases, but the skill level involved in the two cases is clearly different. So this chapter explains why strokes gained had to exist. Golf is a complex, multi-stage decision problem. Traditional stats weren't designed to handle that complexity. Without distance and context, the stat tells you almost nothing about skill. This chapter provides the measurement framework that everything else in the book depends upon. Chapter 4, Scramble and Switcheroo. Chapter 4 takes aim at familiar stats like scrambling percentage. The issue isn't that these stats are useless. It's that they reward outcomes without explaining how those outcomes happened. A successful scramble might mean great short game skill, or it might just mean the miss happened in an easy place. This chapter reinforces a key theme of the book. Labels without context lead to bad conclusions. Chapter 5, Strokes gained off the green. Driving contributed an average of 28% to the scoring advantage of the top 40 golfers. Putting contributed 15%, and all other shots contributed the remaining 57%. So this chapter widens the lens beyond putting. Driving contributes about 28% of scoring advantage, putting contributes 15%, everything else contributes the remaining 57%. There's no hierarchy here, just contribution. Once you see these proportions, it becomes very difficult to justify practicing only the smallest slice of the game. Chapter 6, Distance, Accuracy, and the Secret of Tiger Woods. 20 extra yards of driving distance will reduce the scores of high-scoring golfers far more than those of low-scoring golfers. 20 yards is worth only 3/4 of a stroke per round to pros, but it's worth almost 3 strokes to a short-hitting 115 golfer. And it's nearly impossible for an immature golfer whose good drives travel less than 220 yards to have an average score close to 80 on a 6,500-yard or longer course. So this chapter is aimed squarely at average golfers. Distance matters more, not less, the higher your scores are. The higher your handicap is, the more distance matters. That was a big takeaway from me. Not because of ego, but because distance changes the geometry of the whole game. Shorter approaches, fewer forced recovery shots, more realistic chances to score. This chapter is also dense with data, and if you enjoy numbers and patterns, this is one of the most rewarding sections in the book. Now we get to part 2 of the book, which is about golf strategy. Chapter 7 talks about putting strategy. Better putters leave fewer putts short of the hole. Amateurs need to set their targets farther beyond the hole and work on their distance control and putting strategy. The most important putt distance for amateurs is 4 feet. This distance accounts for 13% of the total strokes lost against pro putters. The range from 37 feet accounts for 46% of the total strokes lost. Short putts are slightly more important for amateurs than they are for pros. So this chapter brings putting back, but on strategic terms. It shows that putting performance isn't just about reading lines, it's about intent, distance control, and giving the ball a chance. Short putts matter more than most amateurs realize, both because they miss more of them and because poor first putts create them. Now, Chapter 8, Tee to Green Strategy. Chapter 8 applies everything from Part 1 to real on-course decision-making. Risk is no longer emotional, it's probabilistic. Where you miss matters. What you're willing to accept matters. This chapter reframes course management as expectation management, not fear avoidance. Chapter 9, Practice with a Purpose. For most amateur golfers, reducing the number of awful shots is the single easiest way of shaving strokes off your scorecard. This might be the most practically useful chapter for amateur golfers. Lower scores don't come from hitting more great shots. They come from eliminating disasters, penalties, chunks, shots that don't advance the ball, blow-up holes. This chapter introduces structured games and drills designed to measure performance honestly under pressure. In Chapter 10, the last chapter, is the 20th hole. The finer chapter steps back. It's less about metrics and more about perspective, enjoyment, expectations, and why we play the game. It's a reflective closing to a very analytical book. So here's my honest takeaway after reading Every Shot Counts. This book won't fix your swing. This book won't give you magic drills, and it won't tell you what club to buy. But what it will do is permanently change how you think about scoring, practice, and decision making. If you're an average golfer who practices but doesn't see the scores you expect, this book explains why. So I put an Amazon affiliate link in the description below. If this way of thinking resonates with you, it's definitely worth reading. So remember, bad swings, they're part of the deal, but good data gives you something to work with.